Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining again. Thank you for adjusting the time change here. I just want to, before we get started, note our upcoming calls. Again, we have Sarah McCue with us today. Then on November 21st, Todd Hoskins and Cindy Kuhn will give us an update on the Global Help Desk. And then on December 5th, we have Becoming a Student of Leadership with Jeffrey Page. And then all the way through into January of 2022, we have Katie Vach of Quality of Life Lab. And with that, I will turn it over to our speaker, Sarah McCue. Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you very much, Chris, and thank you for inviting me. I'm going to, I deeply look forward to the conversation on cannonball moments and ways that we can leverage technology for greater benefit to humanity. And I didn't realize we'd be meeting the morning we turn our clocks back. And so I hopefully everyone is feeling great from that extra sleep. And in the interest of time, I'd like to start by sharing what is known in the Jesuit community as a cannonball moment that happened in May of 1521, exactly 500 years ago, when Ignatius from the castle of Loyola fought in the Battle of Pamplona and had his leg shattered by a cannonball. During that time of convalescence and reflection, Ignatius realized that he had just one wild and precious life. His lengthy time of contemplation resulted in Ignatius studying the life of Christ and the lives of saints. Without this painful, life-altering cannonball moment and deep spiritual retreat, it's likely he would not have entered elementary school at age 33, formed a new religious order, or become a saint. I only recently came to learn of this cannonball moment concept in a seminar at Georgetown, where I teach in the technology management program. Throughout the year, the university has featured these light bulb moments that are meant to bring enlightenment, inspiration, and often force us to reevaluate how we're living our lives and invite us to think and do in new ways. We've all experienced cannonballs that have struck us in our own lives, a cancer diagnosis, the sudden death of a loved one, a near-death experience of our own, or perhaps an encounter with someone who changed how we make sense of our world. I've experienced 3 cannonball moments in my life, one involving divorce, the second when I experienced the internet for the first time, and the third happened when I realized that we can truly eradicate poverty through online education. They're all interrelated, so thank you for allowing me to quickly share these moments. Unbeknownst to me, until much later in life, my first cannonball struck me on the evening of my 2nd birthday. That night, my mother left my father, which left our family destitute. There were no child support laws to safeguard women and their children when I was a child in the 70s. We were hungry because there just wasn't enough. We were cold because my mother couldn't afford adequate heat during the Michigan winters. And we were often sick because over-the-counter medicine was a luxury. Often a sniffle turned to a cough that turned into a sore throat, that turned into bronchitis, that turned into pneumonia. I need to pause to say that this was one of the toughest decks I've prepared because so few who are close to me know my story, but this is the first time I'm sharing it with people I've never met. And it took me more than 40 years to admit to others that I was raised in poverty. That moment was being raised in poverty was so tough, but it was motivating. I set goals for myself as a child, though I was acutely aware of how challenging it would be to achieve them. And so this cannonball of poverty left a crater, but it also formed a deep drive and determination for a different kind of life. I remember so many times looking up into the stars at night and thinking, I don't want this. How am I going to get myself out of this? How many children are living just like me? I knew that other children lived in poverty in the US and around the world, and they were as scared, lonely, cold, and hungry as I was. I remember thinking then, as I continue to do in my work today, it doesn't have to be this way. And I share this brief synopsis of my life so that you might feel the gravity of the next cannonball moment that I experienced In 1987, in the first semester of my junior year, when my ethics class at the University of Michigan was selected to pilot the idea of an online discussion forum using various terminals placed around campus. The professor posted an ethical dilemma each week, and we responded not only to him, but to the posts of classmates. That was the first time I encountered the internet, and I don't think I've yet recovered from that experience, because I knew immediately that this terminal thing had the power and the possibility to transform societies. I didn't know how or what I would become, but I knew that I would focus my career on how information and communication technologies could elevate those living and working at the bottom of the pyramid. First, by helping small businesses create some of the first e-commerce websites and sharing my observations so that other businesses could learn how to participate in e-commerce. I then joined the United Nations and the World Bank to help develop e-commerce strategies and build partnerships with Silicon Valley firms. I'm not sure why that's not forwarding. Later, I collaborated with Cisco and Cisco Foundation and Google to create an education portal that focused on these issues for young people in developing countries. We also launched a mentoring network for women in Africa to be mentored by women in Europe, thanks to funding from Elon Musk back in 2000. We also developed an online memoir writing platform for elders to share their life experiences with future generation, a place for women to share deeply personal experiences to show others that they're not alone, secure communication systems for journalists to report without getting killed, and we encourage developers to create apps that would build leadership skills, resolve conflicts, find mentoring in work, and explore entrepreneurship. About 10 years ago, I began to turn my attention to online education and training. I started teaching online at Georgetown and for other universities to better understand how online education is delivered. My work also focused on online education strategies for developing countries. And several years ago, I was asked to create a no-cost, globally available online university. So I put together the technical team to create the front end and the learning management system at the back end, and working with experts in pedagogy and best practice in delivery of online education. In 2016, we launched World Quant University. It's an accredited, no-cost online master's degree in financial engineering for the quantitative finance industry. In mid-2017, 700 students were enrolled from more than 40 countries. Now more than 5,000 students are enrolled in more than 100 countries with 600 graduates. It costs $3.2 million to build, and it's far less to operate annually. And this is where it becomes a game changer to consider that once connectivity is ubiquitous, we can educate anyone, anywhere. Imagine operating a global online university for less than $500 per year per student. And that is what World Quant University is doing. We proved that highest quality education could be affordable and accessible to anyone, anywhere in the world with an internet connection. And it was a great opportunity to prove that online education can educate mass numbers, where schools don't exist, where illiterate adults can educate themselves in the privacy and dignity of their own homes. Now, as the digital divide narrows with near universal connectivity predicted by 2030, global access to education, degree programs, and technical training will transform business, government, and civil society in developing countries. And whether this connectivity is achieved in 8 or 18 years, it will happen, and governments, global organizations, and the private sector need to be ready for it. Unfortunately, developing countries are not prepared for when connectivity is achieved in commerce, health, financial service, or in my focus, education. And this is what keeps me up at night. My third cannonball moment, when I realized as connectivity becomes a reality in remote rural regions, we can bring world-class education at no cost or extremely low cost to anyone, anywhere, using highest quality online education. Many feel universal education is not attainable due to cost of cost of device, cost or availability of connectivity, and cost of power, whether solar or otherwise. But education for all is absolutely achievable and scalable. Online education and training is exactly what poverty-stricken nations need. Education truly for all, not just a tired, decades-long catchphrase or titles of UN reports on the unmet goal where more than a third of all children and young adults don't have access to any form of education. Soon, we will be able to educate all, not just some. I'm currently looking at ways to provide online higher education to remote rural regions where there's no hope of attending university. Right now, only 5% in Africa, 17% in the Middle East, and 36% in Latin America are able to attend university. This is morally wrong and can be easily rectified by creating online education and training that is lowest cost, highest quality, and open for anyone. Though convincing leadership in government, civil society, investors, and tech firms of the need to prioritize online education for disadvantaged children, young adults, and even older adults is a tough sell. Most everyone involved in international development understands the need intuitively, but more need to have these deeply reflective moments to understand how far more cost-effective it can be to make online education available to millions. A pervasive change in mindset, budgets, and behavior is needed to believe that we can educate every man, woman, and child on this planet, whether in person or online. Though disrupting the traditional education system, especially a global system with no real experience bringing devices, connectivity, solar power, or even knowing how to engage students using online education, is tough to get them to think outside the proverbial box. It will take far longer than it should to leverage online education to fill the gaps, but the UN, the World Bank, foundations, philanthropists, and the private sector need to understand from technical, human, and cost perspectives how it can be done. I invite them to travel 8 hours from the capital city of Kampala, Uganda, as I did 2 years ago, to the village of Nyakagazi, where hundreds of students, most of them orphans, who were privileged to receive exemplary K-12 private schooling, now face the reality that they have no or extremely limited chance of continuing their education. I asked high school graduates how they felt about continuing their education or training online. They got it immediately, especially that they would not have to leave their villages, but stay to create micro businesses, serve as young leaders, and build thriving communities. They are largely unemployed without practical skills and have little hope for their future. A device, connectivity, and source of power will change their lives and their communities. And we need hard conversations with the World Bank and the regional multilateral development banks and the governments they fund on the urgent need to create line items for devices, connectivity, and solar, with Starlink, Google, and others to prioritize bringing connectivity to remote rural regions by forging these economic feasibility plans with development banks, and for nations to prioritize online education when there is connectivity, and to plan for when connectivity comes to communities over the next decade. The problems are access to the internet, low-cost devices, and access to power, but solutions are waiting, but they're not being utilized largely due to lack of awareness. I spend a lot of time connecting tech firms and foundations and community groups, firms, and World Bank initiatives to build awareness of the problems and solutions. And before I conclude, I want to spend just a few minutes sharing what I have observed regarding the transition to online education here in the United States. Online enrollments at most universities are surpassing traditional on-campus programs, particularly around advanced degrees and community college offerings. But it's happening in undergraduate programs as well. Students who are working, starting families, they don't want to drive, pay for tolls, parking fees, or drive 1 to 2 hours getting to class and back. And even undergraduate students are starting to be willing to forego that traditional academic experience. A good example of this is Georgetown University's technology program, designed for mid-career professionals to become trained in AI, cybersecurity, digital transformation, systems design, ethics, etc. And while most classes are offered in person and online, I've watched over the past decade, where I've taught in this program, as most attended in person, but now 90% prefer online classes. Clearly, higher education will continue to be disrupted by online education. And I remember reading an MIT report several years ago that likened this disruption to a tsunami that would close the majority of physical campuses by 2050. At the time, I remember thinking about the University of Michigan, founded in 1817, now 204 years ago. Harvard started educating in 1636, University of Pennsylvania, 1740, Georgetown, 1789. How can an industry of more than 4,000 colleges and universities with deeply institutionalized norms, traditions, buildings, and dorms on millions of acres of land and ingrained thinking, how can these systems be upended as MIT is predicting in just a few decades? But it's happening. In less than a decade, I no longer have to counter-argue the once hardcore belief that quality education can only be delivered in person. As thousands of universities migrate to online formats, and as I enter my 10th year of teaching, each week I encounter the passion of engaged and satisfied students who are learning online. I believe this prediction may come to pass even before 2015. And again, university leadership will resist online education until the economic benefits are understood and realized. Then both the mindset and the priorities shift toward the far more profitable online delivery model. Resistance is typical, as we have observed the past 30 years as we transition to print to online, from news, right? From traditional to online dating, from traditional banking to now we make all of our financial transactions online. And so all the time that we've spent shopping at malls and stores, we've migrated online. And soon autonomous vehicles will disrupt how we drive and fly from point A to B, where we'll just pile everyone into a vehicle at 9 p.m. and arrive somewhere else when we wake up. But right now we can buy a flying car for just $92,000. Imagine the disruption in transportation when this price point becomes affordable for most. Not to mention the joy that can be put back into the driving experience. And so, just as flying cars are about to become a reality, I believe education for every man, woman, and child is achievable in our lifetime. More than a third of the world population does not have access to education. Billions upon billions have been poured into governments for generations to ensure education for all, and we are nowhere near close to this goal. Let's try something new so that we can finally provide universal access to education truly for all. And I deeply thank you for your time, and I look forward to knowing what you think and to your suggestions and to your insight. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. Greatly appreciate you being with us. That was very concise. I think that you have the world land speed record for getting through your content in a PCI presentation. So you get the award, all right, at least for a couple of years. That's great. As I said in my remarks to you, this is a very thoughtful, generous group of people. So in addition to their questions, if you have something that you're trying to connect to that you want, all right, let it be known. Hi, Maylin. It's good to see you. Thanks for bringing Sarah to our discussion today. Your hand is up, so join us. You're on mute.
I'm so proud of Sarah, what an amazing journey that you have shared with us. And I want to see and encourage all of us here at PCI to think about how we could take this forward. Imagine if we at PCI could be part of the journey of Sarah helping to bring online education to the world. And thank you for sharing such a private story. And this shows really what it means to you. I wanted to ask if you mind if we actually feature this presentation on our PCI website, because I think it really will give people a flavor for this. And I thought I would check with the people on this call, because then if we do that, then your comments would be featured on the PCI website. If anybody doesn't want to be, we can have a section at the end of the Q&A so that those who don't want to be featured on the website can be, we can cut off that part. So with that, I want to just encourage people to engage with Sarah. Doug, I think you had a question, or you want to say something?
Yeah, just Sarah, fantastic talk. I'm going to use your cannonball moment when I talk as well. There's 1.3 billion students in the world, and actually, I work with universities and K through 12. I work for Nokia, and one of my passions is connecting the unconnected. Nokia is working with internet.org that Facebook's part of, and they look at how can we make the internet, affordable, accessible, relevant, and readiness. So you need kind of those four things to people to be engaged in. So the challenge is, like, if you look, in fact, I have a map of the world where people have connection to the internet, and like in Africa, is just dark and in Asia is dark, where there's no 4G connectivity. They work on 2G connectivity, which is GSM, which is what we used 20 years ago. I worked for Motorola before I came to Nokia, and it's like, okay, like in the Western world, in big cities in China and other places, but the rest of the world, it's really dark. 45% of people use 2G. Another 45% use 3G in Africa. So think of being what we're doing right now would be unworkable with 2G and 3G technology. Definitely 2G technology. Maybe you could do a little bit of 3G. And then we're going to 4G and now 5G, and actually we're working on 6G technology. So the question is, how can we connect everyone to the internet? How can we make it affordable? The good news is, connecting the unconnected, we got, the people in Africa are using, featured phones and, and even smartphones that are low cost. And how can we transition that, and I'm real excited what Elon Musk's doing with Starlink and so forth, to connect the unconnected. So great presentation, and I'll stop, but you're very inspiring, and looking forward to engaging with you.
Thank you so much.
That's great. Let me ask you a question, Sarah, as we're other people are raising their hands. There are many forms of online education today, all right? So what would you say differentiates your perspective about online education versus some of the other forms that have already, grown up or that you see coming up? Where do you see your perspective as unique?
I had such a wonderful experience creating World Quant University, and we wanted to bring the best financial engineering experts from around the world to create that education. We looked at the pedagogy and approach of the top 20 financial engineering programs at Stanford, USC, et cetera, right? And when we wanted to model what they were doing so that we had the best curriculum possible. And we also were able to pull the greatest minds who were very interested in teaching this content, because it It was free and open to anyone in the world, and that was very inspiring to them.
Mhm.
And I know that there are some incredible programs out there. And I think that, if we are going to have that connectivity, that ubiquitous connectivity by 2030 or even 2040, I think that we need to identify who is doing it right and start to plan and get it into those budgets. But to answer your question specifically, I have been really observing how online education is delivered at K-12 and high, universities and training and adult ed. And I think that, the key is making it relevant, responding to need, industry-led. For example, World Point University was funded by a hedge fund billionaire. His name is Igor Tolchinsky. And he said, I want to bring this education into areas where this type of education doesn't exist, and I want to make it free and open to anyone. Now, quite honestly, he's a smart guy, so he's cherry picking the highest students to help develop those markets in developing countries.
So I have a follow on. All right. I'm going to shift from the modality of internet delivery, web delivery, to the focus of your institution. So as I've studied financial education, we're lagging far behind, especially in accounting, in understanding the intangibles part of the economy that increasingly becomes part of that. We're throwing stuff into the goodwill line, which can either be capital or it can be expense, depending on, what you're spending the money on. It's the only line on the accounting balance sheet that can function as both capital and, expense. And so there's a lot of metaphysical problems with trying to import something that was developed for an agrarian and, society, for, line production into what we're doing now with intangible production. So how are you dealing with that? Or do you have some leading edge thinking there, or is that still catch up?
My initial response is I believe it needs to be industry led to get the geniuses in each of these very, very specific categories. For example, I feel passionately that the world's economists need to come together and create a global online master's, bachelor's, certification, whatever it is, to train the next generation of economists. Because right now, the education that they're getting when they go into the ministries of finance, they go into the World Bank, it's not working. And if we could kind of baseline the things that these individuals need to know to do their job even better, and to have it led by people who know what they're doing, I wish that we could do more of that.
All right. Well, that's a good response. Doug, you have put a great amount of information here in chat. Congratulations. You want to give us a little synopsis of what you're saying in chat, what you're commenting on?
Yeah, so at Nokia, we sponsored a Future of Work event, and actually people from the congressmen and women from the House of Representatives spoke from Washington, D.C. on the Future of Work. Actually, there was just an XR Future of Work event last week that Accenture hosted. Accenture they have 600,000 people working for them. I didn't know how big they were actually when I did a little bit of research. But they have some fantastic on what the future of education. They actually bought 60,000 Oculus headsets. I'm actually working with some universities and K through 12 schools on using immersive technology to get kids more engaged in education. I'm a big fan of Esther Wojcicki, how to raise successful people. Simple lessons for radical results. And she was like, how do we change the education system? Because right now kids, especially, in the United States, they really don't like school. And, is there a way that we can make school more engaging and help? And I'm a big believer that in the next 10 years, we're going to go from the smartphone age to the smart glasses age. the smart sensations age, and we get this immersive technology, and where we have a lot more creativity and wonder. So I'm just really excited about that. You know, how do we get the 1.3 billion children, school-age children, to be lifelong, you know, to be connected to the internet? And then how do we get everyone, you know, to be lifelong learners? So the 7.8 billion people on the planet, you know, from 3 to 100, you know, how do we get this immersive experience so they're constantly learning and engaging on the things that they're the most passionate about? So, you know, Sarah, your talk was just very inspiring, and you know, it encourages me to engage more in this topic.
Okay. Yes, Malin.
Well, Sarah, please respond first.
I would love to continue the conversation and really do a deep dive into what you're thinking and what you're doing, and really just start connecting with people who really want to make a difference to bring education to the most extreme bottom of the pyramid.
Okay.
I
Malin,
think
did you have a
this-
comment?
Yes, I did. One of the initiatives that PCI is doing is with the ITU. So the ITU hosts the WSIS, organizes WSIS, the World Summit on the Information Society, which is the only other entity that brings everybody together from the world. So the UN General Assembly brings the foreign ministers together. WSIS brings the ministers of ICT and the telecom regulators together once a year. We within PCI are the lead not-for-profit working with WSIS for gender mainstreaming. And so I think you are a terrific example of a trendsetter, a gender trendsetter in how you're changing the world. And so we'd like to feature you as a WSIS trendsetter. And then part of this is also to bring women from around the world to be in a pipeline for being speakers, for being decision makers, being involved in implementation. So this the kind of curriculum that you already have with the World Quant University could be extremely effective for them. And I'd like to see if we could explore following up to provide World Quant curriculum to all of those who are in the WSIS gender mainstreaming pipeline.
That would be fantastic. I have a deck on just how it was all developed for anyone who might be interested to see the deep detail. But absolutely, to get young women interested in quant finance would be wonderful. Thank you.
Ben, you had your hand up.
Yes, a couple of, I'd love to hear more about how you build and scale the type of institution that you're talking about. And our prospect is better today than ever to do so with limited resources and to create effective scale. I'm also concerned about a natural tension that I see all too often. Our interest in connecting that we're not training for the 20th century. We're trying to get people to train for their future. And our mission's not to make better villagers, a villager of the past, but our mission is to raise the entire village and have that prospect find a bigger promise than they may have held for themselves over time. And how you build that into it as well, when the immediate needs are there as well, but you're dealing with the long-term preparation.
On the issue of scale, I would love to very quickly take you all through the World Quant University deck, and I promise it will be even more brief than the first one. And on the issue of training so that their communities can thrive, and so that they don't have to leave and go to the capital cities to get that education. When in forming this university for remote rural regions, we did surveys and focus groups of young people in the Middle East, Latin America, and Africa, and they get it. They get what they need to know, to thrive, not only survive, but thrive. And they're very specific. They do want to learn how to build better crops, and they want to learn how to create micro enterprises and learn the latest in financial literacy, et cetera. But they want to go far beyond that. They want what we have, and they know what we have.
Hmm. Other questions, thoughts?
Yeah, I want to ask Sarah, there's obvious benefits to online education and the access throughout the world. I'd like to have you reflect, and Doug touched on this a little bit, but what's lost in not being in the classroom is that personal connection and interaction, perhaps with the students and professors. And you can talk about your thoughts on how that can be overcome or mitigated, or the trends going that way.
It was such a big issue for us as we were developing World Quant University to create that human element. And so we have Friday evening online beer moments, but going far beyond that, training professors to really understand how to create that online moment. When I teach in the MBA program at American University, and it's a 2-hour every week gathering session. And I lecture for about 20 minutes, and then I facilitate a conversation that gets real and meaningful and up to date and current, and what's going on with whatever issue it is that we're discussing each week. And it took a while. It took me, a couple of years to really figure out how to make them engaged and motivated and passionate and comfortable speaking in that kind of environment. And it's just always keeping that student front and center, and making sure that those who are often expected to be in the very back row and not speaking, being very deliberate to bring that whole diversity, equity, and inclusion aspect to that teaching moment when you're online. And there's wonderful ways to do it.
Yeah. So we have a question from Jeanette, and I want to just say that because we have the abundance of time, because you were so efficient at the front end, maybe you would want to share some of the charts specifically about World Quant, University, in addition to your thought piece, because I think, you've certainly sparked interest here. Jeanette, while she's getting that ready, jump in. Question.
Yes, hi. Thank you so much. I loved every single comment. I am so stunned at how wonderful the work you all are doing. My work is a few notches down. We're working with Indigenous communities, and education is a problem for them. And the language element is a problem for them as well. So first of all, these wonderful programs are fantastic. I want to do them myself. But how can we create them in such a way that they can be translated in every single language without the problems of different level of languages? For example, there are languages that don't have words for email. They don't have words for internet. They don't have words for diabetes, right? So we have this huge problem of taking these wonderful ideas to bring them down to everybody. How would you suggest we can do that?
At World Quant, this is such an important issue. So at World Quant University, I said, hey, we can do this in more than 5 of the UN languages. Mm-hmm. And the founder and the funder said, let's just do the 5 languages. And ultimately that did not happen. It's only in English. And it was told to me that the financial world is mostly in English, and so the program is going to be in English. And I was a bit disappointed, but I understood the rationale. But I'd like to go back to the question about scale and tie it into the question of language, and something that I did in the UN long ago, where we were unrolling an economic development training program, and we wanted it in more than 100 countries. And we were very cognizant of the fact that we had to make it not only in the 5 languages, but we needed to disseminate it in more local customized languages. And so what we did is we packaged the IP, if you will, of this program, which was publications and training and diagnostic tools, etc. And we said to the country partner, we want to partner with you. We have created the intellectual property. We have taken and gathered the world experts to come up with this information and content, but you are the ones that need to customize it to make it relevant to your lives and to translate it into the languages that are most important. And so it was a nice partnership where we had just a simple MOU agreement where they said, yes, we want your content. We will customize it so that it's relevant. It was the 80-20 rule. We believed that 80% of anything that we were sharing was universally relevant, but we knew that 20% would need to be customized, and that came to be in fact true. They put their logo on it. They were proud to be associated with the UN, and then they customized it not only for content, but for language. And that's the plan for this remote rural region for developing countries.
If I may have an encore before we leave this subject altogether with the next question, is we're doing something similar at Translation Commons. But one of the things that I wanted to point out, and I would love to know more about this organization and how we can work together. What we found out is that all these communities around the world are learning everything, their knowledge, through a dominant language which isn't their own. And I am bilingual, and I learned how to count in Greek. I can never count in English because that's how I learned how to count. And that's the one thing that we want to stress to people, that when you have the 6 dominant languages that the UN does, and we're guilty as well, we only translate in the 6 dominant languages because we get more exposure. But how can we bring that down now to those kids in elementary that need to learn science and they need to learn math in their own language so it's embedded in their brain? And that's one thing that I would love to work with you and all the other organizations, because we have a whole advisory board trying to get this going. And this is our next big thing for the International Decade of Indigenous Languages.
I would love to talk with you further.
Thank you.
So as you get ready to take us into more depth, I want to invite Lynn Wells, all right, who is our colleague on the speakers and guests committee, to ask a question. Lynn?
Yeah, so I just had a question about, I guess I want to start off with the non-online social infrastructure that needs to go with effective online learning. And we got involved in this last fall in the Cool Abilities project that Cindy ran, where we were asked to sort of think outside the box and put ourselves in the position of people with whom we weren't familiar. And so we wound up looking at, for example, a Luo tribeswoman who was really, really good in online and clever and with data. And she got interested in drones in this scenario and actually made contributions to remote sensing of agriculture, whatever. The point, though, was the technology is available to do that. But how do you set her up so that her family is supportive of her doing this? And she finds the online mentor who, okay, by that time you have language translations, so you can talk from Luo to French or whatever. But that person who takes an interest in the hundreds of thousands of other underprivileged people out there and mentors them, and then puts them in a position where their contributions can be heard. So yes, the technology is possible to do this for her, how can the social system, abet that?
I have been saying for quite some time that we need an online mentoring mechanism that allows particularly young women, children, the girl child, et cetera, to not only ask their questions in a very private, personal space, but to become empowered, to start slowly changing that mindset that is so pervasive in developing countries about the girl child is, not even second in importance in the family in terms of education, right? I hope that may have gotten to your question.
No, I absolutely agree with that. And the question is, is there I know whether there's a role for PCI here. I'm not sure its role. I mean, WorldQuant is certainly doing it in your area. I'm sort of looking at the people who, how do you get people positioned so they can take advantage of the online opportunities if they come from unconventional, non-education supporting, girls got married by 13 and support the family agriculture, that kind of thing? How do you weave that into the possibilities that are inherent in the technology? And I agree with you, mentoring is a masterful way to go, just not sure how to cause it to happen.
I love the question, and it is so profoundly important. And I would rely on the NGOs that focus on giving incentives to communities to empower that girl child and that young woman. UNICEF, does it well, and there are ways. But I mean, it's terribly exciting to think that once the parents and the community understand what an education can do for both the girl and the boy, that's when the change happens in the community.
Thank you.
So Sarah, share a little bit more about WorldQuant University, please.
Thank you very much. I'm really delighted to share why and how WorldQuant University was created, to give an idea of how we did it, but to also spark perhaps some cannonball moments of creating other free open online universities that can be formed at relatively low cost with global reach to potentially millions. I joined WorldQuant University. I'm no longer there, but I joined in 2014 to develop WorldQuant University, and I left after serving as president for 2 years. Our goals were to become accredited after the required 2-year operational time that it takes to achieve accreditation, to focus the curriculum on identifying signals and patterns from analysis of big data, to ensure that the university is open to all who have the math and other skills to succeed at zero cost to the student, and to ensure the student is as engaged, interactive, and successful as possible. Many ask about entrance requirements that include an application, CV, GRE or GMAT scores, proof of a bachelor's degree, an entrance essay, 2 letters of recommendation, and English competency. And these are additional considerations that aren't required, but we felt will help the student orient him or herself to success in the program. But essentially a bachelor's degree in a related field is required with a minimum GPA of 3.0 and a math GRE of 700 or higher. And I decided to use this experience in creating a free open online university to show that highest quality education can and should be either no cost or very low cost for all, to prepare students around the globe for data and data analysis positions, to increase employment and to create this type of industry in regions where they don't exist. And for some of the most prestigious degree programs, it can cost up to $150,000 for a degree in quantitative finance after you factor in tuition, housing, books, fees, etc. And our goal was to ensure that the same high quality curriculum and interactivity could be provided at no cost. So competitors are Carnegie Mellon, Columbia, Stanford, USC. They all offer purely online degree programs in quantitative finance. And this is the estimated tuition of similar in-person programs, where it's nearly $80,000 in tuition for one of the Carnegie Mellon top-ranked in-person program, and averaging $62,000 for the top 10 and $0 for World Quant University. And so for a relatively minimal investment of less than $5 million, an education is now open at no cost to thousands. And if we took the $5 million donation and gave it in full ride tuition scholarships, we would have been able to fund 62 students at a cost of $80,000 in tuition per student. Alternatively, we invested $5 million to create an online master's degree program that is now enrolling thousands of students. The goal was to enroll 1,000 students for the first cohort in 2015, and then 5 cohorts planned for the first year. So it was rolling admissions. And if World Quant University charged a student $50,000 for this degree, it would cost the first cohort of students $50 million in tuition alone. And so it's truly mind-boggling when you do the math, and it shows that a $5 million donation that Igor Tolchinsky, who is the CEO of World Quant, made is what I like to say a $5 million investment in humanity. And it's well worth it to make this education free and available to anyone. Our criticalities, we recognize that most are circumspect and critical of online education. Online courses cannot be as rigorous as face-to-face. Online courses cannot provide as much information as face-to-face. Interaction is limited in an online environment. And we were very aware of these concerns. And so we wanted our curriculum highest quality, highest possible interaction, and making the experience as close to the traditional on-campus experience as possible. Focusing on social interaction, ethics, and research that would support their world-changing ideas were definitely emphasized. Our org chart is very similar to traditional universities and includes all the functions typical of a fully staffed higher education institution. We received our name recognition in 2015 from the State Council of Higher Education in Virginia, and we offered our first class at the beginning of 2016 to anyone anywhere in the world. And I want to pause very quickly. I'd met Igor Tolchinsky, and he wanted to take his philanthropic foundation in a new direction. And he said, we hear that you are doing some things in online education. What do you think? And I said, I think you can win the Nobel Peace Prize if you make this education, K-12 education, or, something the world desperately needs at a bachelor, a master, or a training level. And make it highest quality, lowest cost, and open to all. And, being the hedge fund billionaire that he is, he said, okay, will you create a free open online master's degree in quantitative finance? It's not my technical area of interest, but I really was fascinated to have the experience to create it. And so this is the curriculum: financial markets, programming in Python, statistics, econometrics, algorithms, risk management, and alpha design. And then this is the course development sequence. And accepting this offer, he also said, and I want it done in a year and a half. So we created this online university by having the first 4 courses developed and then admit the students. And as they're getting educated on the first, then we develop the second course. So it was very, very intense experience. Another benefit of online education is that the best instructors can teach from any location. So we emphasized finding and hiring the best instructors. And courses have video lectures, assigned reading, homework, discussion boards, study groups, a series of videotaped guest lectures from eminent experts from around the world, capstone-like projects, activities, case studies, and then I had previously mentioned the online beer parties, to name a few. And academic support is also a priority. And so the student has access to faculty, traditional TAs, study groups, live chat, a helpline, and in-person tutoring online. And so we formed an advisory board of senior tech and financial sector executives and practitioners in the field of quantitative finance and online education, with emphasis on them offering guidance and support to World Quant University and preparing the students for internships and full-time placements. And so we said, if you want to join the advisory board, we need you to commit to being very diligent in finding and helping make introductions for jobs. And our advisory board members, we had a rather distinguished advisory board to bring credibility into the industry. Our steering committee guided us in accreditation, contracts, curriculum, marketing, online education, media and private sector partnerships and legal issues. So, I mean, you could tell, we were very, very serious about getting this right. And this is an outline of the website, focused on recruiting and careers, establishing a very active alumni network. And we made it a priority to work very closely with quant firms and recruiters to post their jobs and provide coaching and support to our alumni to quickly find jobs. Articulation agreements were prioritized to allow for the transfer of credit and acceptance of the degree, so that if they wanted to get another master's or PhD, the accreditation process is very arduous, very serious, and very important. And so we hired a consulting firm that's all they do, is they help universities achieve accreditation. And then we decided to pursue accreditation from something called DETC, the Distance Education and Training Council. And the competitive advantage we felt were to create excellent employment opportunities for graduates. The curriculum is extremely practical and current, and to really help develop this industry in developing countries where the quant field is still emerging. Target audiences, we undertook a global marketing campaign to reach undergraduate, graduate, or PhD students in stats, physics, chemistry, math, operations research, control systems, computer science, and applied engineering, as well as those working professionals in the finance industry, the traders, the researchers, the asset managers, data analysts, and others. So those, we just leveraged LinkedIn until we couldn't leverage it anymore to reach to them. And then I'm going to skip over our global marketing campaign. When you work for a hedge fund billionaire, it's nice that you can work with the best PR firms. But this is what we developed in terms of our overall industry and corporate and PR outreach and campaign. And so yes.
Yeah, I just want to point out, we're getting to the bottom of the hour of our first hour, all right, which is our formal time with everyone. So I just want to thank those of you who have been with us up to this point. Thank you for being part of the discussion. I see some other questions coming in. If you can stay for our second half hour of ongoing questions and presentation, we'd be delighted to have you stay with us. Sarah, please continue.
Sure. A lot of people ask about the development budget, and this is, our initial development budget and the very few line items that it takes to develop an online university. And our operational budget, I haven't seen the internal budgets in quite some time, but this was the operational budget when I was there. And the few line items that it takes to run the university. I showed in the previous deck that we got the operating costs to less than $500 per person for cohorts of 5,000 students. And so I absolutely understand that, some per capita incomes are still at, $2 a day, but for those middle and lower tier countries, to get a high quality university education for $500 a year is really game changing in my mind. And I fundamentally didn't agree with the funder who is the CEO of World Quant, but I didn't agree that tuition and all costs should be free. I think that no matter where you are on the planet, you have to have commitment and skin in the game to make that educational journey meaningful. But he was paying for the startup, and he continues to pay all operating costs. But I show this slide to answer the question that I often receive on, how could you charge just $500 a year to students that they would either pay or they would be covered in scholarships. And I wanted to show that with a relatively minimal investment, education can be free and open to all. This is an unprecedented opportunity to reach those who do not have access to education, to bring a cost-effective solution to the problem of massive student debt, and to provide industry-led specific knowledge in a very highly specialized and emerging field. And I'm sure you geniuses could think of probably 50 examples of where other similar universities could be developed, and to provide highest quality education when the current educational system does not provide adequate or UN jobs. And so imagine if the UN, the World Bank, Silicon Valley, and the education industry started to offer either no or lowest cost education from preschool, primary school, tech ed, and higher ed in any language, in all countries at a fraction of the cost of the billions that is spent on traditional education. Location no longer has to be a barrier to education. And so why shouldn't education be lowest cost and available to everyone?
Sarah, that's great. Thank you for sharing that. I know that Mike Nelson had put some comments into chat about, who's graduated from the program. Mike, you want to jump in? Don't know if he's still.
Sorry for joining late. And maybe you answered some of these questions already. I was looking at your website and I saw where you have 650 or more graduates already. And I saw that Daphne Kiss is the new CEO. When did she take over that? I've known her for 30 years.
Yeah, I met Daphne. I had served we launched, and forgive me, I may be a year off, but I think we launched in 2015, and I served as the president for 2 years. And then Daphne came in to take over as CEO. Quite technically, you have to have a PhD to serve as the president of a university. So that's why she's the CEO, but she's de facto the president.
Okay, and the only other question I had that you haven't answered and that your website didn't answer is this meant to be sort of a flexible program? You can do it in a year and a half, or you can do it in 4 years, or is there some kind of schedule that most students follow?
There is flexibility, but with the accreditation process, and I don't remember, I think all students have to be finished in 4 or 5 years.
Mm-hmm. And there is no in-person requirement of any type. They don't do some kind of capstone event where they come for 2 weeks, or it's all online.
I don't know. We were talking about doing that and how important that is just for relationship building, but I do not know if they're doing that now.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, I was a professor at Georgetown and we were doing some pretty cool stuff 10 years ago, but this sounds like the next level. So congratulations on helping get this started, and thanks for making time to share this with us. And again, maybe you answered this already, but are you engaged in some other similar projects at this point?
At this point,
Maybe you can tell us about things that aren't in stealth.
Because I've got so personal at the beginning of, I basically just quit everything and just focused on online teaching when the pandemic happened, because I just couldn't do the intensity of these kinds of things while taking care of a family and protecting them. And so I'm just kind of emerging out of my little chrysalis that I've been in for the last year and a half. And I'm now starting to focus on creating this online university for remote rural Africa. And of course I have a deck that I could take you through at some point, but it really does.
Or if you have something you can share, right? You got some smart people on this call who could probably weigh in. And again, I apologize for coming in late and asking questions that everybody else already knows the answer to.
I'm really glad that you asked, because that's what I'm really focused on next. That's my kind of one of the last bucket list things that I want to do, is create an online university for remote rural regions in developing countries.
So I might suggest, Sarah, that you connect with Willie Foote at Root Capital, because he's already doing rudimentary financial training in villages, that are very remote in Africa and sub-Saharan Africa and Latin America. So if you're trying to expand that, I know that many of because I did a piece of research for him for all of the funding, groups, the Ford Foundation, Rockefeller Foundation, Kresge, Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, all their motivations for donating, funds to support their mission. And, at the end of the day, a lot of them are doing it because as the village becomes more economically, viable, more and more of the children, can go to school. Right.
Wonderful.
So,
Thank you.
anyway, so if you don't know that group, I'm glad to make an introduction. He's been a client, all right, and a satisfied one. Maylin, you raised your hand.
Yeah, and some of it was touched on because I was curious. So you devoted clearly 24 hours a day for 2 years to set up World Quant. And the bulk of this whole session has been about World Quant, but you left it 3 years ago. And what is happening for you as, during those last 3 years, and what do you need from us to support your personal journey? This has ended up being a great pitch for World Quant, but you left it 3 years ago, which is marvelous and incredibly generous. And perhaps, may I say, a thing only a woman would do. Anyway, what is your trajectory, and what can we do to support you on this the University for Rural Communities?
Thank you, Maylin, and thank you for just always being so lovely and generous to me and so many others, including most particularly women. I am just starting to, and I'm just going to take 2 seconds to show you my handy dandy deck here. This is, the online university for remote rural regions, and you'll see, a lot of the themes that I've been talking about. But it's really focused on entrepreneurship. And we, a couple of years ago, conducted a survey, mostly in Africa, to say to young people, what do you want to know? If we could give you any information, any training, and these are some of the things that they had said that they want, certifications and or concentrations for a higher ed degree. And then, it gets to what I was saying before, the acceptance rate is just so low throughout the world that online education can help. And, we can offer a 4-year degree program at less than $1,700 or an average of $418, right? I mean, that's just mind blowing every time I see that. And the need for education is obvious, and I haven't updated every slide yet, but absolutely there are online degree programs that are emerging throughout the world for exactly this kind of market. I am concerned that many of them are considering it kind of a cash cow. I think that would be a unique differentiator for this program. My goal is just to keep it as bare bones, highest quality, so that it is affordable and accessible to all, right? And then, World Quant, and these are our criticalities and how we're organized. And so I'm obviously going to be taking the same approach that I did for World Quant, in creating the remote rural regions. And so, I don't know if there's anything, I'm just basically applying World Quant to this deck and to this approach. And this summer I did get a bit of personal time to start reaching out to foundations, the MacArthur Foundation and Ford Foundation, and, you know, just starting to say, you know, I really want to do this. And our budget has gone up because whereas the 2-year program for the master's degree, this would be a 4-year program. But, you know, we've got our cohorts again of 5,000, you know, for less than $500 a year. And lots of focus on team. Okay.
So
Yeah.
Sarah, a question. Have you given consideration to, given some of the areas of expertise that were requested, a 2-year as opposed to a 4-year degree program? Because it seems to me that the technical and community college system, you know, can provide a lot of what you need, right, in a shorter period of time at a lower cost, right? And, you know, I work with another organization called Untitled, right, which has presented to this group before. And what Dr. Jessel is doing, you know, seems to be spot on for what some of these, you know, folks would need. And they would be, you know, likely impatient for education to time to salary, right? Or, you know, return, right? That you would be in the workforce faster. So if you're interested in that, let me know.
Definitely I am. And quite candidly, I'm looking for kindred partners, whether they're funders or they come from a particular industry perspective. I want to do something that helps create jobs in these very economic desolate regions. And if it's training or if it's a 2-year program, but I would love to work with someone who gets it and then says, hey, let's work together.
Yeah, I mean, the kind of techs that you would need to service International Harvester, John Deere, Caterpillar, you know, equipment, the fundamentals are not going to take a 4-year degree, right? So the fact is they've already partnered with their local technical and community colleges to create people who can do that kind of work. Same is true in pharmaceuticals, right? Everybody's got to have the same skills to be able to go into a class 1, class 2, class 3, you know, clean room environment. So you don't need to get that on the job. You know, you can arrive ready to go, you know, and, you know, so think about, you know, if that would be a lower cost of entry, both for what you're trying to do and for the learner. And if you want to know more, I'm glad to share.
I will follow up. That sounds wonderful.
Okay,
Because
other thoughts, questions? Maylin, you were jumping in.
Yeah, I was. We had a wonderful presentation about a couple of months ago by Parminder Jassal of Untitled. And Kevin, I've kept in touch with her, and we're really gangbusters going.
I know
forward
she
with it.
sings your praises. I talk to her every other week as an advisor to the organization, and she's very grateful for what you and PCI has been able to do in terms of, you know, connective tissue. It's great.
This just shows the value of the PCI community.
It does.
So thank you for bringing her. Sarah, she is amazing. I hope that you can speak with her, and I will follow up with you as I have followed up with Parminder. I think it's very, very important, the education area for everyone. Thank you for all you're doing.
So let me just check chat here. Pari, do you have you're making nice comments here. Would you like to say it directly? Oh, you have to leave. So she may have already left. So we're coming up to the top of the hour in 15 minutes. Anyone else have questions, comments, suggestions for our guests today? All right. So do you have a synopsis, Sarah, and an ask of our community? Others may not be with us. So, you know, summarize, you know, where you are and what you would like to be connected to, and then we'll conclude our session today.
But first, thank you so incredibly much. This has been just such a great opportunity to hear from just such geniuses who have been there and done it. So thank you for your advice and your counsel. And as far as what would be ideal is I'd love to continue the conversation about providing education, whether the person is passionate about pre-K or K-12 or adult training or a master's degree program. I'm very, very interested to develop that kind of very practical education that's needed for developing countries. And so more specifically, hey, Sarah, you need to know this person, or did you realize that this program is going on? And I'd love to hear what everyone thinks as far as, when is that ubiquitous connectivity coming? We've been waiting for it for decades. And, is there hope that it will be 2030, that 90% of the world will be connected? I would just love to either hear from this group now or really talk to people who are immersed in that obsession with bringing universal connectivity.
The last thought that I would leave you with is, I think that it's great that you had a sponsor that helped catalyze, right, what you did with World Quant. It may be that you find someone else, but like Feed the Children, right? I'm wondering whether there's a grassroots component where people can sponsor a student, right? And there are a number of clothing, feeding, housing, shelter, those are very basic and are very necessary, right? So the question is there a similar impulse for education that you could spark, right, for these developing nations?
Oh, that's wonderful.
Okay,
See,
Chris.
Bonita's hand is up.
Oh, I didn't see, but hi, Bonita.
Hi.
You.
Well, I've been listening intently, and what the question that keeps occurring for me, Sarah, is given that I was a faculty member in a graduate program that was thrown into teaching online, and certainly it was an extraordinary experience. And even now at Santa Clara University, we're having sessions to talk about what did we learn teaching online that we can bring into the classroom and combine in our classrooms. But what I want to ask of you is, what have you planned to work with your faculty to develop their skills for teaching online?
That is such a good question. And it's definitely an obsession of mine. And I haven't developed a deck on that topic, but I think I will in terms of, excuse me, and I'm not saying that, I've got it right, but I've been online teaching for almost 10 years now. And I think that, there are best practices that can be brought in, and, it's really just making it all about the student and giving them that freedom to opine and to question and to in that very safe space that somehow just magically happens when you're in person. But I think we can do that online as well. And so, but I also teach at George Washington University in the Elliott School for International Affairs, and they have a different way of engaging with the student. And so I think it's incumbent upon each university to say, this is how we feel that we want to cultivate that student in that online environment, because it's completely different than what Georgetown is doing. And then I also teach at American, and I'm knocking myself silly to teach at all of these universities so that I can understand the teaching aspect and how are people doing it and what are the best practices that I can pull out, but also what's the best LMS, how, what's the funding model. But it's so important to give instructors the courage to try new things and not just sit in front of a screen and talk for an hour.
Absolutely. Well, I want to encourage you. I'm really eager for you to develop that part of your curriculum. for all the experience that you have in all these different realms. So thank you. I look
Thank
forward
you.
to that as well. Okay.
Me too. Thank you.
So Chris, let me turn the call back over to you and please preview again our upcoming speakers.
Thank you so much, Sarah. And we have a number of fascinating talks coming up, some of which I've sent invitations out for, and other ones will be coming soon. So once again, thank you, everyone. And thank you, Sarah, again.
Sarah, thanks for being with us. Cheers. Bye, everyone.